Okay, so we're going to talk now about charisms in more depth. And a couple people and I were talking a little bit during the break and mentioned on something very important. And that is that sometimes it's easier to recognize charisms in other people than in yourself. Like you see a person and you're like, oh, this is that person. Like you just know it, you know how they work, you know what they, like just how they operate. And that's something really, really important because, thank you. That's something really, really important, and those I would encourage you to share. Like a big piece of this class and a big piece of the workshop in making you aware of these charisms and talking about them is not just that you'll see them in yourself, but that you can learn to see them in other people. And when you point to them in other people, it's really helpful for their discernment because that's part of the recognition. Like I said earlier, when you see a charism, there has to be a kind of, it's for the service of the church. And so it's not a real charism until it starts to be affirmed by other people. Like this was a place where I encountered grace. This is something that I encountered in you or something that you did that moved me. So that I think is good to share, to be upfront with people and to talk to them. You got to come to the 11 o'clock Mass this morning. I feel like my homily was a little bit more in this direction. If you listened to me at 4 o'clock last night, I don't think I made a lot of sense. People, I sometimes say that I have gotten used to, I almost never tell people what I think about my own homilies because I don't want to spoil their mood. I don't think that as many of them are as good as you do.
You're wrong.
I know, sometimes I could be wrong. Sometimes it's also, I did public speaking in high school and have had a lot of chances to do it. And there's pieces that I can pick up on in speeches because I've done it a lot and I've been a judge for some things and worked on it that will bug me, but for ordinary people, you don't notice quite as much. Like some of you don't have the ears to hear when our piano players hit a wrong note. But it's really, really funny to pick out, like sometimes even Ben, who's a magnificent pianist, and he could do a lot of things. There's times where he'll hit a note and I'll be like, oh, that wasn't right. You know, or if you listen to a symphony, and every once in a while, even with professional musicians, you'll hear something and it's like, oh yeah, that was a wrong note. That one didn't fit. That one wasn't supposed to be there. And if you don't have a trained musical ear, you can't hear that as easily. My parents, at first, made me suffer through, but eventually I enjoyed, so I took 10 years of piano lessons. I got good enough to the point where, like, I could have been very good. I just didn't have the desire or the time to practice as much as I needed to for the skill level that I had. But sometimes I dream about it and it hasn't happened yet. Maybe one day. Okay, see, this is why I try and tell Father Ross all the time, you always think it's going to work and then it doesn't. So we had to bring my laptop in, but eventually I'll get that working maybe. Now where did I put the remote? There it is. Home, arc. Oh, and then I have to tell it to do, oh, that's my background. Do you know why I did this? This was very intentional. Because computers can be really frustrating sometimes. So I wanted something beautiful to look at. So I made something beautiful to look at. Now where is the presentation? Okay. Is it going to be really distracting if she's on behind me? Well, we don't do that. Oh. I don't know if the sound is going to work. Do you understand now why I just put things on paper? It's like the video, and then it wouldn't connect to the network, and then it wouldn't find the file on the internet. And now it's like, I wonder how we're going to do sound. I think sound will go through an HDMI cable, though. We'll see when we get there. You know what? Maybe we're going to do this in a different direction. She's the one for encouragement, and there's some videos built into this PowerPoint. But I think what we'll do is we'll go through the charisms one at a time, probably more quickly. And then when we finish, then we'll watch some of the videos of people talking about their charisms. Does that sound like a plan? Sure. And then at the end of it, there's an inventory that I will give to you, and you answer questions, and there's an answer sheet and those kind of things. You can take it home if you want. If you finish it here, you can hand it in. But there's a scoring metric for it, and it's meant to be something that helps you think about the charisms that you have. But I wanted to start the way that we did, and I wanted to start with you thinking about your life experience first, because that's the biggest piece of it. The interview and the other things can help give you more information and can help you sort through some of that, can help give you some ideas of directions to go. But sometimes people are like, oh, well, I scored high in this. And it's like you look at them, that's not your charism. Yeah, but it's on the thing. Yeah, I know, but it's not. I know several people that are like this, that are convinced that they have certain charisms, and it's like, nope. Not supernatural, not work of grace, not something you talk about all the time. Nope. So it is a good tool, but it's one tool kind of in the toolbox. So that's the basic plan for the rest of the day, is we'll talk through the charisms one at a time. I'll show you the videos of some of them. We have some different people. Some of them are from Napoleon that Father Ross has encountered before. We do want to build a library of videos of people who have the charisms here at Holy Spirit. So like they interviewed me for teaching, and I don't remember who the other person they interviewed is. Maybe Sarah. So Autumn Cotterba has a lot of skills with video editing and videography and stuff. And so she's doing some of those videos. And ideally, what we'd like to get to is a series of videos from people at Holy Spirit that have the charism and that use it, so that they're familiar faces and you kind of can grab onto it. But all of the work in that isn't done yet. So we'll use what we have. Okay, so let's dive into the charisms in depth. The first one is helps. And this is tough because the name of it's on one page and then it starts on another page. Sorry about that. Sometimes it's life. So the charism of helps. I feel like you could maybe better call it the charism of helping or helper or something like that. But the idea of this charism is that it works to enable another's vision to happen. This charism is about working with people, not so much with events or doing things hands-on, but these are like the people that recognize gifts in other people and see obstacles and can help give them the push that help them achieve their dreams or live with their charism or their gifts. And they work to make those come true. And as they do that, again, you have to look for that kind of supernatural grace component, that there's a supernatural effectiveness to it. They help other people accomplish great things. And they get affirmation, they feel love, they encounter God through using their gifts to help activate gifts in other people. That's the charism of helps. In general, it seems like people with this charism prefer to work in the background. Sometimes they're people who help the leaders of groups, they work with them, but they're like on the strategy team that met before or that helped you work on it, not the one that's going to be in front and doing the presentation or receiving the acclamation. One of the key phrases that people will say, sometimes there's sort of characteristic things that you hear, without you, without your help, without your inspiration, without your teaching, my goal would have never been accomplished. Like I would have never been the person that I am today without you. That tends to be a common kind of thing that people with this charism hear. They tend to work with a leader. So lots of the charisms, when you see them and when people are using them well, can kind of work in a virtuous circle. You need people who are big picture people who are able to lay out dreams and inspire other people to be involved in them. You need administrators that are good at helping take those dreams and make them reality. You need people that are helpers, that can see the gifts and the talents and abilities in other people and give them the push, like you can do this. And that's kind of what it's meant to be, is that in a parish, when people start having these different charisms and they start working together, when you start living from them, you can kind of see how they fit into a larger puzzle. You need all of them together in many ways to accomplish the mission of God or the mission of grace, at least as well as you could. And so there's different people that are involved in different places. People with this charism tend to struggle, or it's harder to find in some ways because it can look very ordinary and low-key. It's something that tends to happen in the background, but it's important that we need these kind of people around. People with this charism do need to learn to say no, that you can't help everyone, that it's not your responsibility to make it all happen, that they have their own agency, they have their own freedom, they have their own desire and their own walk with God, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that's the way it goes. Discouragement can be possible. You can get discouraged. And that's one of the challenges to deal with. That's one of the things about charisms. It's a little bit like personalities too, is they tend to have sort of characteristic strengths and characteristic struggles. And so it can be like if you're in a place where you don't feel like your charism is being used or where this is being found, it sort of feels like you're denying yourself or you're getting shut off or something is in you isn't being fed in the way it needs to be. And so it's good to understand that. It's good to see, like one of the most frustrating things for me on earth is when you have teachers that don't know what they're talking about. I can be really good at paying attention when people are good, but when it's like you don't have a clue, my attention span is gone before you blink. And I have to try really, really hard. If I don't have confidence in the person talking, like that's one of the skills that I need to work on. And so charisms tend to be like that. They tend to come with a set of gifts and come with a set of abilities and also come with a set of struggles, like lots of other things. And some of them are a little bit easier to identify than others, but learning about ourselves and kind of learning like, okay, if this is my charism, this might be one of the struggles. That can be valuable information to have. So that's the charism of helps. Make sense so far? They're sort of like helpers, like I said, helping. Some of them, I scratch my head a little bit at the names that they have, and it's like, it'd be better if it had a different name. Like assistant, I don't know. Something about it just like helps sounds not right. And one of the kind of neat things that the Catherine of Siena Institute has done is they have looked at the lives of some of the saints and they give suggestions of patrons for different charisms. You can always ask for their intercession. Sometimes they're good lives to read if you're going to look at a saint's biography and read it, because you can see this charism involved. Usually all of the people that I put are saints, except some of them I put in parentheses and they aren't, but they're people that seem to have had that charism. There's a few of them that kind of surprised me. You might read their life and disagree a little bit, but usually you can see it pretty easily. So the saints that they suggest are Saint Macrina, who's maybe one of the early martyrs. She's the sister of Basil the Great. And there's a family, and I think she's in that family. Paula and Anne Lynn, or Line. I didn't even really know who that was. They just had a little blurb about it in one of the resources that I was preparing from. So she'd be a good one to look up. Who is Saint Anne Line? So the charism of helps. Next one is hospitality. This is a charism that is all about nurturing others by making a welcoming place for them. It tends to be people that have the space or have the desire to host or to make a home, to open their space to other people. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but it seems like it goes along with that. Hospitality are people who tend to be motivated to find those who are new and alone in the community and welcome them, invite them to things, make a space for them. People with this charism tend to welcome strangers. They tend to invite them in. They tend to be people who enjoy having others over and frequent guests at their home. It can be food, shelter, companionship. But again, what you want to look for is that kind of more than ordinary. This is more than just like people that like to have people over. That's good, and that's a great thing. That's a great gift. That's something that we're very much called to do. But when you want to put your finger on a charism, you want this kind of like I talked about my friends, their names are Rick and Mary Machado, and they have a very simple house. And it's not always the cleanest place. It's not that they have this immaculate, palace that they invite people into. It's a very, very simple home. She's got a kitchen that's smaller than lots of people's closets. And it's just a space that's one of the warmest, most inviting homes that I've ever been a part of. And there's a kind of genuine friendship behind it. They have adopted a number of seminarians. They got to know a bunch of the Fargo guys, and that's how I got to know them. And we've kind of become lifelong friends. I still call them and visit with them when I have a chance. So that's kind of the charism of hospitality. They do have some space, but in their case, it's a very simple space. They have an old table that's kind of cobbled together from a bunch of different ones they had at different times, and chairs. But there's a grace that works when you spend time with them, particularly in their home, that just seems to touch you with the kind of hospitality, with the kind of welcome that God would give. That's the charism of hospitality. And I think that this can happen in other ways. I don't know too many people where I would point to hospitality specifically like in companionship or specifically in shelter. So some of these I think are also good to discover too. If you're like, I think I have that charism, you can probably have more to say about it than someone who doesn't have it can. And remember that they can operate in different ways. That this is kind of like a standard, it's a place to begin, but you can discover some of this, it could be like a Boy Scout leader, for instance. Sometimes there's several different possibilities for one person. Like the leader of a group, that could be kind of pastoring, but the real work of grace might be in the way that they're welcoming people, might be in the way that they're creating a home for them. So instead of pastoring, it might be more of this hospitality. To a certain extent, it doesn't matter because it's putting a name on a reality, and the reality is more important. It's more important to do it than to get the exact right name on it. But sometimes you do have people where you could have several different possibilities because there's different ways that it could work. Like you might be part of a group but have the charism of helps. And so you're part of a group, and that might look like some of the group ones, but what's really the work of grace for you is working with individuals and motivating individuals or encouraging them. It could be the charism of encouragement and sharing words and inspiring people and in motivating them and moving them. It could be several different ones. And so sometimes you might be able to put your finger a little bit more easily on the life experience. And then we have to start sorting through a little bit like, is it this kind of thing or is it that kind of thing? Because it can go in several different directions. The charism of, the saints for hospitality: Benedict, Margaret Clitheroe, and Swithin Wells. I have no idea who Saint Swithin is, but that's a cool name. Sometimes I feel like young parents need to look up books of old saints because they have cool names, and Swithin could completely become a modern one. Be like something that no one else named their kids. The charism of mercy. Like I said, this charism, I think, if you think about the life of Mother Teresa, this is the charism you see. The charism of mercy is about reaching those who are suffering with practical deeds of compassion. To clothe the naked, feed the sick, feed the hungry, care for the sick, those kind of things. It tends to be very hands-on. People who have this charism tend to be very drawn toward those who are suffering. They see a great dignity in the poor. In serving the poor, they feel like they're serving Jesus himself. And they are serving Jesus himself. That's part of this kingdom. This is more than talking to people or wanting to do something for them. These are the people that really get hands-on. I know a priest that I would argue has this charism. He's very, very motivated to help the poor in Haiti. And if you're with him, he talks about it all the time, almost constantly. He's bothered when other people don't see the same need or aren't just heartbroken over the suffering of people around him. That, again, is kind of this charism of mercy, and you can see sometimes how it shapes how they see the world. And it's not always a bad thing, but it's just good to know. Like Mother Teresa, if you think about this charism with her, she was very, very motivated and very, very moved with compassion for the poor and the sick and performing deeds of mercy for them. She wasn't the greatest teacher. She wasn't a great speaker. She was short. She was like 4.5 feet tall. She stuttered. She stumbled through her words. She had all kinds of things about her that, one would not think that she was the leader of a great missionary organization. Probably one of the most effective missionary organizations in the world. And I don't think she had the charism of administration. When you look at the missionaries of charity, it's always a little bit like flying by the seat of your pants. And it works. It's really incredible. It works. Sometimes it's like you don't really have a plan and don't really have the bank accounts and don't really have X, Y, and Z. And Jesus shows up. But the charism of mercy, people with this charism tend to feel blessed to spend time with those who are suffering. They make a difference through hands-on action. Mercy, as far as this system, is very related to encouragement, but mercy is more deeds and encouragement is more words. So when you do deeds to help support people, to have compassion on them, that's much more likely charism of mercy. When it's more that they're helped through your words, even if you're doing things with them, but it's your words that really speak to them, that's more the charism of encouragement. This is more like physically taking care of people, not necessarily seeing them healed. I think of, the missionaries of charity are famous, like their houses for the dying, where they care for the dying, and most of them still die. I mean, all of us die eventually, but like even with great care, many of the dying still die. For people with this charism, it can be hard to serve people freely. I think they have to deal with the frustration that other people around them aren't as motivated by these needs as they are. They aren't as motivated to reach out and to help those who are suffering. Saints Damien of Molokai, Teresa of Calcutta. Charism of mercy, any questions? Charism of pastoring. Pastoring is about nurturing the spiritual growth and inner relationships of a community. These are the fire starters that like to get people organized and corralled and moving in a direction. I have a friend who has this charism, and it's like she likes to garden. She started a gardening group. She likes to homeschool. She started a homeschool group. It's just always gathering people together and getting them to move. Charism of pastoring. Their passion tends to be for the Christian community. They form personal connections by bringing other people together. They love it. They thrive on it. They want to make it possible for people to spend time together. People with pastoring tend not to favor super huge groups because those personal connections are important. Like, yes, it's a group, but it's also about building a group and moving somewhere. And if a group gets too big, it tends to get unwieldy. They do make great group leaders, but they want a small group where they can know everyone. They can struggle when groups are disorganized, when people don't want to be a part of something. Those are some issues that people with pastoring can face. They also face the challenge of nurturing themselves. Like, we all are helped, we all are assisted in our walk of grace by being with other people, being part of a group, doing something together. We all need other people to lean on, but people with this charism also have to remember that they have to take care of themselves, and they need their own support network and their own friends, and it can't be all about giving to a group. It also has to be about taking care of yourself and feeding yourself and making your own connections. Pastoring is also different than the office of pastor in a community, like in a parish. That to be a pastor is an office that you're called to by the church. To be an associate pastor, those kind of things. Not every pastor has the charism of pastoring. That there's a difference between the office and the grace and the gift. Some saints, Charles Borromeo, Henry the Shoemaker, don't know who Henry the Shoemaker is. Josepha Naval Gerbes, don't know who that is. Catherine Sonzo, I think, is another one on the path to canonization, but isn't there yet. Those would be some saints to intercede for you if you have the charism of pastoring. Encouragement. These are the people that are the cheerleaders of the spiritual world, the supernatural world. They're the ones that see and point to good things, and they help people grow closer to God and help them be more fully themselves through their words. This is a charism that is very, very helpful for counseling and for spiritual direction. It's often communicated through words, not always, but it's often through words. It tends to be that people sort of come to them with their messes and their lives and their stuff, and they build them up and give them a push, and people feel better when they leave, like they were strengthened, they were encouraged, they were given a boost in their life. This is something that all of us are called to do as Christians. We're all called to use our words to build up other people, and there's a gift to that. So one of the things that you're looking for is a sort of supernatural effectiveness, that what you put in, that your effort seems to have this kind of outsized reward, this bigger than what you're doing. This can be a hard charism to discern, because you have to work on the difference between ordinary encouragement that's like, yes, that made me feel good, and when it's actually a charism. Because lots of things in life, lots of Christianity is meant to be encouraging, walking alongside people, leading them as disciples, teaching. Lots of different things are about encouragement. And so it's a little bit harder to find and put your finger on, like, yes, this is a real charism and not just the ordinary call of the Christian life. This person who has this strengthens and heals often through one-on-one encounters. It's sort of like the counterpart of pastoring. Pastoring tends to be for groups. Encouragement tends to be for individuals. People often share private struggles. Encouragers build them up, push them to keep going. Sometimes people will comment that they feel alive or energized in words that you shared with them. They feel very moved by what you said. You tend to, when you have this charism, it's like people tend to show up on your doorstep and tell you about their problems and tell you about their struggles and tell you about their difficulties. That it's not necessary, but it just seems like when this is a real charism, I think the gal on that thing for encouragement says, she's like, I've got this sign on my forehead that says, come tell me your problems, or tell me about your life. And she's an encourager. That tends to go hand in hand with this charism. They tend to be trustworthy. One of the challenges that people with encouragement face is that they aren't always very encouraged on their own, that they tend to need support, because even though they have words for other people and building up other people, they need to hear it themselves. They also tend to struggle a little bit when things aren't super exciting or don't feel like they're moving in the right direction, or when their words don't seem to have the impact that they want them to have. Saint Barnabas means the son of encouragement. St. Francis de Sales is another one. I'm not as confident about Francis de Sales. They have a couple of